Welcome to Epic World History, where the rise and fall of empires come alive. In this series, we uncover the story of the Huns nomadic horsemen from the steppes who shattered borders, drove migrations, and reshaped the destiny of Rome. From burning fields to crumbling fortresses, from Gothic exodus to the twilight of the empire, witness how fear, war, and legend collided. The late 4th century trembled as a new force swept from the steppes, the Hun invasion. Nomadic warriors, swift on horseback, stormed into Europe like a whirlwind. Their arrival shattered old borders, sending waves of fear through kingdoms and empires alike. For Rome, already weakened by internal strife, the Huns became a nightmare. This was not just another barbarian invasion, it was terror incarnate. The Huns were unlike any enemy Europe had faced. They were masters of mounted archery, firing deadly arrows at full gallop. Their sudden strikes left cities burning and populations fleeing. Roman writers described them as demons of the wilderness, faces scarred, eyes fierce, and movements unrelenting. The Hun invasion forced Europe to reckon with a new style of war, one born on endless grasslands where speed meant survival. Before the Hun invasion, Gothic tribes lived along Rome's northern frontier. Farmers, warriors, and migrants, they had long balanced between Rome's influence and independence. But when the Huns appeared, the Goths were crushed. Entire tribes fled westward, seeking refuge across the Danube. The pressure of the nomadic warriors sparked a chain reaction, what historians later called the Great Migration. The arrival of the Huns had set Europe in motion. The Gothic exodus soon reached Roman territory. Refugees crowded the banks of the Danube, begging Rome for asylum. For the empire, it was a dilemma: deny them and face violence, or admit them and risk chaos. The Huns had not yet struck Rome directly, but their shadow hung heavy. By forcing the Goths into Roman lands, the Hun invasion destabilized the empire without firing a single arrow. The Goths, desperate and starving, soon rebelled against Roman mistreatment. At Adrianople in 378 AD, they crushed a Roman army and killed Emperor Valens. Though the battle was fought between Rome and the Goths, the spark had been lit by the Hun invasion. The nomadic warriors had set in motion a storm that Rome could not contain. The empire's decline now seemed inevitable, accelerated by horsemen from the east. Who were these mysterious nomads? The Huns originated far to the east, beyond the Volga and lands of endless steppe. Some believed they descended from the fearsome Xiongnu, once enemies of China. Whatever their origin, they lived for war. The Hun invasion marked the westward push of a people hardened by wind, hunger, and ceaseless raids. Their sudden arrival stunned both barbarians and Romans alike. Hun warriors lived on horseback. Their tents, families, and herds all followed wherever the grass grew. Children learned to ride before they could walk, and bows were drawn as easily as breath. To settled people, their way of life seemed alien, even monstrous. Yet this nomadic culture gave the Huns unmatched mobility. The Hun invasion was not just military, it was a collision between two worlds, the steppe and the city. Roman chroniclers often wrote with horror. Ammianus Marcellinus described the Huns as more savage than beasts, their faces scarred, their lives consumed by war. But behind the fear lay admiration. The Huns had mastered a form of combat the Romans could not match: swarming attacks, feigned retreats, and sudden ambushes. In the Hun invasion, Rome faced an enemy who refused to fight by the old rules. The Hun invasion did not strike Rome immediately. Instead, they shattered tribes along the frontier: Alans, Goths, Vandals. Each broken tribe became a wave, pushing further into Roman lands. The empire found itself overwhelmed, not by one enemy, but by many, all driven westward by the same terror. Thus the Huns reshaped the map of Europe, long before they even crossed into Roman provinces. For the Romans, the Hun invasion was an invisible war. The empire fought Goths, Vandals, and others, yet behind them lurked the horsemen of the steppes. Each treaty Rome signed, each battle Rome lost, traced back to Hun pressure. By the end of the century, Rome's northern frontier had collapsed into chaos. The nomadic warriors, though unseen, had become the empire's most dangerous shadow. When the Huns finally appeared in Roman chronicles, they seemed almost mythical. Their speed defied belief. They struck without warning, vanished into the plains, then returned with fire and steel. To Rome, they were ghosts on horseback, unpredictable, merciless, unstoppable. The Hun invasion was not merely physical conquest, but psychological warfare. Fear itself became their greatest weapon. By 395 AD, the Roman Empire split between East and West. The Huns tested both. They raided into Thrace and Macedonia, forcing Constantinople to pay tribute. Meanwhile, their pressure in the north sent refugees flooding into Italy and Gaul. Rome versus Huns was not yet a direct clash, but the balance of power was shifting. The empire of cities now bent beneath the weight of nomads. The Hun invasion revealed Rome's weakness: dependence on barbarian allies. To defend its borders, Rome hired Gothic and Germanic mercenaries, men who themselves fled Hun terror. These allies fought bravely, but loyalty was uncertain. Many fought Rome 1 year, the Huns the next. The empire's survival now rested on soldiers who had once been its enemies. Huns themselves were not united. They fought as clans, led by chiefs who demanded loyalty through strength. Yet in chaos lay power. Even divided, the nomadic warriors terrified Europe. As one Roman historian wrote, "The Huns do not need walls, they are the storm." The Hun invasion proved that Rome's greatest enemy was not another empire, but the wilderness itself unleashed. In the forests of Germania, along the rivers of the Danube, and across the plains of Gaul, stories spread of Hun terror. Villages were abandoned before they even arrived. Rome's people lived under constant dread. Was that thunder in the distance, or the hoofbeats of nomadic warriors? The Hun invasion reshaped not only borders, but the very psychology of late antiquity. Rome versus Huns soon became a contest of endurance. The empire built walls, fortified cities, and hired mercenaries. But the nomadic warriors needed no fortresses, they had the open steppe. Each Hun invasion moved like water, flowing around obstacles, striking where least expected. Rome had centuries of tradition. The Huns had adaptability. The old empire struggled against a new kind of enemy it barely understood. The Huns' greatest strength was fear itself. They rarely fought prolonged battles. Instead, they burned fields, captured herds, and vanished into the horizon. Each raid weakened Rome's supply lines, drained its treasury, and spread panic. By the late 4th century, the empire's mighty legions seemed powerless against shadows on horseback. The Hun invasion was proving that Rome's military machine was no longer invincible. Yet not all saw the Huns as demons. Some tribes admired their strength and sought alliance. The Alans, once their victims, at times rode beside them. Even Romans sometimes negotiated with Hun leaders, offering gold for peace. But peace was fleeting. For the nomadic warriors, tribute was a strategy, not submission. The Hun invasion thrived on instability, turning enemies into allies and allies into prey. By driving tribes into Roman lands, the Hun invasion created a domino effect. The Visigoths, forced across the Danube, later marched into Italy. The Vandals, fleeing west, would one day sack Rome itself. The empire's enemies multiplied, all pushed like waves before a storm. And behind it all loomed the horsemen of the steppe, shaping Rome's destiny without even stepping into its heart. The late Roman Empire was already fragile political corruption, economic strain, and divided leadership. The Hun invasion struck at this moment of weakness. More than swords and arrows, it was pressure-endless, unrelenting pressure that broke the empire's defenses. Historians later wrote that the Huns were less conquerors than catalysts, driving Rome toward collapse faster than it could resist. As the 5th century dawned, the Huns prepared for greater campaigns. Their raids grew bolder, their alliances stronger. Rome versus Huns was no longer a distant fear, it was becoming a direct confrontation. Soon, entire legions would march to meet them, and emperors themselves would negotiate for peace. The terror from the steppes had become a power Europe could no longer ignore. Yet the first Hun invasion was more than a military event. It was the beginning of a legend. Out of the chaos would rise leaders like Attila, names etched forever into Europe's memory. But in the late 4th century, even without a great king, the Huns shook the world. They were proof that empires built on stone could fall to riders born of grass and sky. For Rome, the Hun invasion was both a tragedy and a warning. The empire learned that walls alone could not save it, nor treaties, nor armies. The threat came not from one border, but from the very movement of peoples. The nomadic warriors were not simply enemies. They were history in motion, reshaping the ancient world into something new. The terror from the steppes marked the twilight of Rome. It did not fall in one battle, nor in one invasion, but in relentless waves of change. The Hun invasion was the earthquake, the tremor that shook foundations. In the centuries that followed, kingdoms rose from Rome's ruins, but all remembered the horsemen who first brought fear from beyond the horizon. Thus began the age of the Huns, an age of terror, migration, and transformation. The nomadic warriors came as strangers, left as legends, and forever changed the destiny of Europe. For Rome, their arrival was the beginning of the end. For history, it was the start of a new chapter, where the world of the steppe met the world of the city, and nothing would ever be the same.